welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm going to share a book haul with you. Do I realize the irony of sharing a book haul when my last video was counting my unread physical TBR and also unhauling a bunch of books? Yes, I do realize that. Here's the thing though. Here I am justifying. I'm the queen of justifying book purchases. I brought a lot of those books. I still haven't even gotten all of them to McKay's. And I had so much store credit. And I actually took 2 different trips, which usually I don't go to McKay's like back to back because it's actually quite far from my house. But my daughter and I went to a concert that was in the same town as McKay's. So we went to McKay's together. And then I had plans to meet up with a dear subscriber friend of mine, Victoria. So we met halfway there, went book shopping together. It was glorious. I got rid of a ton of books and came back with far less books than I actually got rid of. I also have some books that were either gifted to me or, I ordered because I had like a free book on Thrift Books and a bit of a gift card left from Christmas and stuff. So, not all of these are from K's, but most of them are, and I didn't pay for any of these. As always, I will have these split up into genres, so if you want to skip around, you can. Let's start with middle grade. So I got Sharon Creech's Walk Two Moons, which I've never read, and this is one of several books on here that were very highly inspired by Victoria when I was with her, that she's like, oh my gosh, you have to read this. So I picked this one up. I actually don't know anything about it. I've read a couple of Sharon Creech books before that I enjoyed, and this is a Newbery winner. She also said if there was one book out of I think there's like 4 or 5 books here that she recommends, she's like, if there's one that you get, it has to be this one. And it's I Juan de Pareja. I don't really know anything about this one. It says he is the slave of the great Spanish painter Diego Velázquez. And I don't know anything else about it, but I've heard wonderful things from her and then another friend that I was talking to about it as well. The third Victoria recommendation that's also a middle grade is The Bridge Home. And this has such a lovely cover, and I've seen this before and been drawn in by the cover, but I don't know anything about it, and so I never even picked it up, and she's the only one I've heard talk about it, I think. It takes place in India, and there are runaway sisters, and the girls find shelter and friendship on an abandoned bridge that's also the hideout of 2 homeless boys. And they kind of are like a found family situation is what it sounds like. I found a couple of Moomin books there, so I had to pick them up. So Moomin Summer Madness and Moomin Papa's Memoirs. And I just think the Moomins are just adorable. The last middle grade book is actually one I got for my daughter. Maybe I'll read it at some point. Maybe I won't. I don't know. It's a Beverly Cleary book that we had never heard of called Otis Spofford. The description on the back is what sold it to us. There's never a dull moment at school with Otis Spofford around. He's always brewing up a little excitement, and that means trouble for everyone else, especially neat and well-behaved Ellen Tebbets. When he's not sending spitballs soaring or sabotaging the class experiment, Otis is stealing the show at the school fiesta or becoming a bug-collecting hero. And it just sounds like a lot of fun. Moving on to translated fiction, I have one here that is a gift from my friend Dia, and that's the Dollar Gut Dream Department Store. And this is translated from Korean. I think the premise of this is that it's this department store where you can get your dreams. It says, what if there was a store that sold dreams? Which would you buy? And who might you become when you wake up? And it's about someone who starts working at this department store. And I've been so intrigued by this, and this is actually a book that is going to be read for Crystal from Fiber Artsy Reads. She has like a Discord, and they're doing bi-monthly reads of translated Asian works, and this is going to be one of them this year. So I'm really excited to have this one. So thank you, Dia. The other 3 are ones that I found at McKay's. So one of these I have wanted to read for a while. It's a cozy Japanese book called We'll Prescribe You a Cat. And I'm pretty sure it's just like what it sounds like. People are having a hard time and they're given cats that improve their lives. And that just, as a cat lover, that just sounds wonderful. I found another one that doesn't sound as cozy. It actually sounds really sad. And it's If Cats Disappeared from the World. And this is not sad just because of the title, although the title does sound sad. Like my daughter saw this and she was like, it would be a terrible place. And I'm like, I agree. But this is about a man who, I guess he finds out he only has months to live. But then like the devil shows up and gives him an offer that for every thing he decides disappears from the world forever, another day is added to his life. So it sounds like it's going to be like very melancholy and very thought-provoking, but I also really loved the cover of this one too. And the last translated work I have here is also Japanese, and it's called Palm of the Hand Stories. This was only like $1 or $2. It was like really inexpensive, and it is a collection of short stories, and I don't know anything about it at all. I was just really, really intrigued by it because they run from like 1924 to 1972 that this author wrote. And so I was really intrigued to read some translated Japanese literature that is, some of it's over 100 years old. Moving on to sci-fi and fantasy, I got Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, and it has like one of these old terrible fantasy covers, which actually fits in great with my Farseer trilogy that I own because it's also these terrible old covers. But I actually had a little bit of a gift card left from Christmas for thrift books. And so I decided I was going to go ahead and get this one because I really wanted to read it and continue on with The Realm of the Elderlings. And this book was next, and I was just going to get it from Kindle because I'm kind of not sure how I'm going to land on this one because I know that it has some things in it that I will not enjoy. But like the wait was so long on Libby, like months and months long. So I decided I was going to go ahead and get it. I technically didn't pay for it, so if I don't like it, it's okay. I was super excited when I went to McKay's and I found The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. I have had this book on my Amazon wishlist for years, and I look for it every single time I go to McKay's, and I have never seen this there, ever. So I was really excited that it was there. This is a collection of sci-fi short stories, and I really think, based on what I know of Ken Liu, that I'm really, really going to like him as a whole. But I know Dia really loves this collection of his short stories, and she's recommended it to me, and Dia's recommendations have literally never, ever steered me wrong, so I had to get it. I have a couple of historical fictions here, one of which I've already read, and it was a favorite of the year last year. But when I went to McKay's and I found Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan for only $4, I had to pick it up because despite the fact that this is so slim, it's actually kind of expensive. Like it's like, I think like $16 or $20 on Amazon, even though it's like a teeny tiny little book. So I was really excited that I found it for $4 because this is one I would want to read again. And I read it during December last year. It takes place around Christmas time. It's not particularly Christmassy, but it does have a cold atmosphere, so it fits really well for that time of year. But I absolutely loved this. This was like one of those deeply reflective historical fictions, and it was just so well done, and I still think about it all the time. The other one is a historical mystery, which was also recommended to me by Dia. This was my free book from Thrift Books that I had. So I got C.J. Ransom's Dissolution, and this is the first in a series. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember how many books are in the series. I want to say it's a trilogy, but it could be more. But it's about a monk during the Tudor time period, and I think he's solving a mystery. Dia said it doesn't have like the exact same feel as like Name of the Rose, but it has some components of what she had hoped Name of the Rose would be. And I read Name of the Rose a little while back, and I did a reading vlog for it, so I'll link that if you want to see my in-depth thoughts. But there are things I loved about it and things I didn't love about it. So I'm excited to read this. We are now into the biggest section, the classics. It's always the biggest section, and it's always the genre that I feel the least bad about having the most physically unread books. Because classics are usually ones I want to read over and over again, or will be assigned to my daughter in school or whatever. So the first little stack that I have here are all books that I got when my husband's grandmother passed away, and he flew home for her funeral a couple of weeks ago. They did the coolest thing at her funeral where they had a whole bunch of her books because she was an avid reader. She was a librarian and also a school teacher. And so she had so many wonderful books. It was one of the things that she and I connected on. She was always giving books to me or to my daughter Claire. I wasn't able to attend the funeral, but my husband sent me pictures of it. And then after the funeral was over, I was like, hey, if no one took these books, please bring them back. And so he had limited space in his suitcase, so he only brought 4 of them back for me, but I have a few more that are coming when my in-laws come to visit soon. I actually don't know which ones they are, so it's going to be a surprise. But one of them is this edition of Lord Jim. I actually already own this one, but it was a beat up paperback. I haven't read it yet. This one is like a really pretty hardcover with deckled edges and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really, really excited because this is a far nicer edition than the one that I own. And I think it's one I'm really going to enjoy because I really, really like Joseph Conrad. This next one, I don't know anything about at all. It's The Kentuckians. I don't even know who it's written by. Oh, I love this map on the end pages here. Janice Holt Giles, written in 1953. And I don't know anything about this at all, but the fact that it's called The Kentuckians and we currently live in Kentucky means that I really wanted to have it on my shelves. I have two Jane Austens here because I couldn't pass them up. They're both the Barnes & Noble editions, although they're actually different types. So Emma Persuasion. I actually have the Paper Mill Press editions of these, and I actually don't like them. I don't like the Paper Mill Press editions at all. I don't like how the cover feels. The margins are gigantic, but the type is really small. And one of the ones that I read, it was a Jane Austen that I read in that edition. There was actually a bunch of typos in it. And I was like, what in the world? So I've been wanting to replace them anyway. So there's two of these and all of them were there, but I don't know if other people took any of the other ones. So I don't know if those are the ones that are coming for me with my in-laws or not. The rest of these are McKay's books. So I was really excited to find Mystery and Manners by Flannery O'Connor. So it's actually technically a nonfiction, so I could have put it in its own section, but because I only have one, I don't really want to do that. So this is a collection of her essays, I think. It has the subtitle like Occasional Prose. So it says, when she died in 1964, Flannery O'Connor left behind a body of unpublished essays and lectures, as well as a number of critical articles that had appeared in scattered publications during her lifetime. So these are selected and edited by O'Connor's lifelong friends, Sally and Robert Fitzgerald. So I've heard great things about this, and I'm really excited because this is not something that you typically see at used bookstores or even regular bookstores. This is not like one of her more popular works. Another thing that I have never seen at a used bookstore before is Roderick Random by Tobias Smollett. Tobias Smollett was one of Dickens' favorite authors, and I see Humphrey Clinker there all the time at McKay's, and I actually have purchased it. I've not yet read it, but the fact that he's one of my favorite authors means that I really want to read his books at some point. I found a different Willa Cather each time that I went that I don't own. So the first time that I went, I found The Professor's House. I don't know anything about this at all. It says it's the story of a scholarly professor in a Midwestern university passing through the critical, uneasy period between middle age and old age. I also found Lucy Gayheart, and most of the Cathers that I have are in this exact same edition, and some of the covers are terrible. Like, they're just really bad. And this one's not. This is actually like the cutest one so far. It says, in Lucy Gayheart, Willa Cather seems to be writing the lightest and slightest of records of a short life. The obscure life of a young girl in an American village who goes to Chicago to study music, falls in love with the middle-aged singer, knows a brief moment of deep contentment, and then the pain of separation that is final, but the impression left on the reader is not slight. I found a couple of old Du Maurier books there with really terrible covers. So I found Rule Britannia, which I thought was going to be a historical fiction based on the title, but it says it's set in the not too distant future on the raw, blustery English seacoast of Cornwall, and it's the rousing saga of an indomitable woman who takes on the combined might of the British and American armed forces. The other one, I feel like I might hate it because it's called The Parasites. So I feel like it's going to be just really examining some toxic relationships. And it says they pursued love and luxury and treated the world as their private playground. So I feel like there's a good chance I might hate this one, but it was really, really inexpensive. And I love Du Maurier's writing, and she always has like really unlikable characters, often as her protagonists, but if not, almost all the supporting characters are pretty unlikable, but sometimes even the protagonists and the supporting characters are unlikable. But her writing is so wonderful, and the stories that she weaves are so fascinating. So I wanted to give it a try. I found a Thomas Hardy I'd never heard of called A Laodicean. It says it's one of his most unusual novels, a contemporary romance in which the heroine is torn between her infatuation with an ancient dilapidated castle purchased by her father, a wealthy railway contractor, and her desire to be a part of the modern world and its technological achievements. I found a collection of Dickens short stories, none of which I've ever heard of before. So it's The Signalman and Other Ghost Stories. And I love me some Dickens ghost stories, especially, A Christmas Carol. That's the most well-known one. But this has A Signalman, A Madman's Manuscript, The Bagman's Story, The Story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton. It's a really long title. The Story of the Bagman's Uncle, The Baron of Grogswig, A Confession Found in the Prison in the Time of Charles II, also a long title, To Be Read at Dusk, The Trial for Murder, A Child's Dream of a Star, Christmas Ghosts, The Hanged Man's Bride, and Mr. Testator's Visitation. I also found a Conrad that has like 2 of his shorter works in it that I do not own, Youth and the End of the Tether. Don't know anything about this, but again, I really love Conrad's writing. And I found another Conrad, An Outcast of the Islands. I love this cover so much. I picked up a play, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. So this is one I've wanted to read for a really long time. I don't know much about this. I just know that it's written by a Black playwright. I think it was written in the 50s and examines life in a Black family and addresses like women's rights and civil rights and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to read this one. I found The Monk by Matthew Lewis, which is one I've wanted to read for a long time because I guess the Italian proved to me I kind of like a creepy monk story. Also, obviously this is a used copy, but I think it's hilarious that someone drew shorts on this person. So when we were on our Feb Regency reading sprints, I remember Tristan talking about Tristram Shandy, and I was like, oh, I see that at McKay's all the time, but I've never picked it up. So the next time I went to McKay's, I picked it up. I know that it's a satire, and that's pretty much all that I know about it, but apparently it was highly influential, and so that's what makes me want to read it. This next one's not one I heard of at all, but I was drawn in by the Oxford World Classics spine, and it's Melmoth the Wanderer by Charles Maturin. If you've read this, let me know. So I'm really curious about it because I looked at the back of it and it said it's written by an eccentric Anglican curate in Dublin, and it brought the Gothic novel to a new pitch of claustrophobic intensity, surpassing the quiet tremors of Anne Radcliffe's romances in its reckless accumulation of cruelties and blasphemies. Its tormented villain, a Faustian transgressor, desperately seeking a victim to release him from his fatal bargain with the devil, was regarded by Balzac as one of the great outcasts of modern literature. Like, this sounds so interesting. It was published in 1820, so it still fits in the Regency time period. So I feel like I have my Feb Regency read for next year. The next book that I have is one of the most expensive books, although again, I didn't pay for any of these because I had store credit. But usually if I'm purchasing a book or looking at books at McKay's, I'm not going to want to pay more than like $5. I mean, I have a few in here that were $7 or whatever, but this one was like around $10. And the reason I got it is because it's a Steinbeck, and I love Steinbeck in general. This is Tortilla Flat. I have this edition of like 4 of Steinbeck's works that were my grandfather's, and they look exactly like this. And so when I found one that was the exact same, I had to get it so it would match the other 4 that I have. My daughter and I have been reading about Roman history lately, and so I picked up Virgil's Aeneid, and I am really fascinated to read it. I don't know when I'm going to get to it because ancient literature actually is really intimidating to me, and I think that's because I've tried reading the Iliad a couple of times from a couple of different translators, and it's just difficult for me to get through, and I think that ancient poetry in general is like that, and this is also ancient poetry, but I do want to try it at some point, and I want to get to it and get through it because I think it will be really valuable, and maybe I just like need to be in the right headspace. So if you have any advice for reading ancient literature, I'd appreciate it. The next one is actually a recommendation from Victoria. It's the last Victoria recommendation, and that's Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. I have never been interested in picking up any D.H. Lawrence because what he is most famous for is Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was known for being like highly explicit in the time period that it was written, but it's still really explicit, I'm pretty sure. So it's one of those books that I'm like, I'm not really actually interested in reading that at all. And I just kind of like, even though I go to McKay's all the time and I see tons of his books, so I knew he was a very prolific writer, I never had any interest in picking up any of the others because I all just kind of grouped them all into that category. Victoria read this recently and she loved it. And she's like, everyone in this book is a terrible person doing terrible things, and yet I loved it. It was so compelling. It was so beautifully written. And so I was like, okay, I have to get this. And she wanted a copy because she had gotten it from Project Gutenberg, I think. So there were 2 of these Barnes & Noble copies, and we got matching copies. So I'm going to read it at some point. And I hope that I enjoy it because I've read a lot of books where people are doing bad things. And as long as it's not glorified, like, oh yeah, good for them for doing all these terrible things, I don't mind. I've wanted to read this one for a really long time, so I was really excited when I found a nice edition of The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle there. Everyone knows about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle because of Sherlock Holmes, but did you know he wrote a book about dinosaurs? He did, and I am really intrigued by it. The last book I have here is the one that I am possibly the most excited about because I saw it there and I was like, what in the world? I didn't even know this was a thing. And it's The Fall of Arthur by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this is a story about King Arthur in Middle Earth. I was like, what in the world? So it says The Fall of Arthur recounts in verse the last campaign of King Arthur, who even as he stands at the threshold of Mirkwood is summoned back to Britain by news of the treachery of Mordred. I was like, oh my goodness, what in the world is Arthur doing in Mirkwood? Like, what? I have to get this and I have to read it. Anyways, that's my book haul. So yeah, so I'm excited about all the books that I got. I know that I will not be going to McKay's for quite some time, probably not until this summer. So I definitely lived it up and got rid of far more books than I ended up bringing back. If you saw my unhaul video, you know that. And I'm just justifying bringing in more books and adding them to my physical TBR, apparently. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Have you read any of these books? Are there any that you're really intrigued by and you would like to see me prioritize sooner rather than later? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.